Some journeys take us beyond the edge of life and back again. Real people, real stories. They've crossed the veil and touched the other side, revealing deeper truths about who we are and why we're here. Welcome back, and welcome to The Returned.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. I'm MJ, and welcome to my channel. Here we explore near-death experiences, spiritual awakenings, and everything in between. I upload a new video every week, so if you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, and share. Today we have a very special guest, a two-time NDEer with powerful insight into the afterlife. Please welcome Andrew Bauer. Andrew, welcome to The Returned.
I've talked to so many NDEs over the years, from I participating in panel discussions about death and the afterlife. And for me, the best part was meeting with other NDEs after the fact, because their stories kind of let me know that I wasn't alone. And the variety of stories was amazing, still is to this day. But so anyway, let me tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am. When I was 7 years old, I actually contracted a virus, a really bad one that attacked a lot of kids. It was all kids under 16 in the Western Massachusetts area where I grew up and the surrounding area. So you have parts of New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, so on. And what this virus did, they never identified it to my knowledge, but what it did is it acted something like a mix of chronic fatigue syndrome, where you had severe lethargy, slept sometimes 20 hours a day, had no energy, so on and so forth, but also had earmarks of like a spinal virus, in the way that we had fevers of anywhere from 102 to 107. And when you get to 106, 107, your brain is basically boiling inside your skull. And mine was at 102 at the very beginning. My parents brought me to the hospital. My brother went at the same time, but his was a mild version of the virus. He was home in 48 hours. Me, I was in the hospital for most of a month. And during that time, I was kept in an isolation in my own room, because they couldn't allow anybody to touch me except for the doctors and nurses, and they had to be fully gowned up, mask and everything, in order to even take like a blood sample or take my blood pressure or whatever they needed to do. So being 7 years old, I was obviously scared out of my mind, because I had never been away from my family. I had never been alone like that. And my grandmother actually ended up staying with me most of the time that I was in the hospital, because my parents both worked. They also had my brother to care for at home. So they couldn't be with me as much as she could, where she was retired and had more time. So she remembers that I was in a coma. It got to the point where I had a fever, went up to 105. Yeah, 105 or 106. And I was in what they call septic shock, which is basically, septicemia is a very serious condition brought about by different viruses. Septic shock is the worst part of that. That's where you start to have organs shut down. So it started with my digestive system. I couldn't keep anything down. I was throwing everything up. I couldn't process anything. They had me on antibiotics, IV saline, everything they were trying to just keep anything in my body. But even that, it was kicking up. And as things went along, my liver shut down, my pancreas shut down. It was just one thing after another in succession. And my body, what the body does when you start having organs shut down, is it shuts the body down and puts you into a protective coma to try to protect the most basic functions, like your heart, your lungs, and your brain. So that's why when somebody dies, the last things to go are those three. It's always the heart rate that stops, it's the lungs that stop breathing, and the brain, the brain flatlines. When you have brain death, you're gone. Well, 4 days in to the coma, my heart and lungs stopped. And within an hour of that, my brain scan flatlined. And they called the code. They'd already been working on me, but they basically called the code blue team, which is the extreme team, basically. They come in only when, life is threatened. And if they don't do something quick, you're going to die and never come back. So they came in. My grandmother was shuffled out into the hallway, was only able to see me through the little window in the door. And At this point for me, I had been in a black nothing for several days. Like I was not awake. I was not dead. I was kind of in a limbo state. And all I can remember is just eternal blackness and no sound, no sight, no, I couldn't feel anything. They did multiple, I can't remember the term. It's a thing where they do pain stimuli tests and to see if your body has a reaction. And when you stop having a reaction to the pain stimuli, that's when your brain is starting to shut down. And at this point, that's when I lost all feeling whatsoever. And when my brain flatlined, I found myself up in a back corner of the hospital room that I was in. And it was instantaneous. There was no transition. I was just in the bed. I was gone. And it was like all blackness and I'm up in the corner. It was that quickly. And I remember seeing there was 2 doctors and 4 nurses working on me. And there's one particular doctor that I remember specifically because I had never seen him before. He wasn't on the team that was treating me up to that point. And he had this comb over bald spot on top of his head. And the thing is now, remember, my body is lying flat in bed. So he's above me, never bent over, never. So there's no way I could have seen this bald spot from the position that my body was in. And actually, when I came back, I described it I asked one of the nurses and said, who's this doctor that was working on me? And she said, what do you mean? Dr. So-and-so or Dr. So-and-so, the people normally working on you? I said, no, somebody I'd never seen before. And she asked me to describe him. And the first thing I said was like he had a comb over bald spot, like he combed from left to right over this bald spot on top of his head. And she, oh, that's Dr. I think his name was Johnson or Johansson, something like that. So let me give him a check. And she brought him in and had him bend over in front of me. And I said, yeah, that's him. That's the guy. I said, I don't know how I saw him. All I know is I did. I was up and I pointed to the corner of the room where I'd been at that time. And I said, I was up there watching you guys do your stuff. And I remember seeing his head. But anyway, while they were working on me and I'm up in the corner, I could hear a voice inside my head. And it was a very calm, melodic voice. And I described it later as sing-songy. And I found out later this was my main guide. And the species that he had been before he became my guide was a very tall, willowy creature. He was not from Earth. He was of a planet very far, in fact, on the other side of the galaxy from where we are. And the reason we can't see where he's from is because of the galactic center so full of gas and dust and light that we can't see through it. His voice helped me relax and just said, you're okay. You're still alive for right now, but you won't be very soon. But you are going to be okay. There's nothing wrong. We're here with you. Don't worry. And when my brain finally completely flatlined, that's when this voice told me, that's it. You have died for the time being, but you said you need to come with us. And at that point only, like I had not seen him. I couldn't see anything from the other side. But when he said that, I felt myself going through the corner of the ceiling up in, like I could see the hospital. I could see the area, and I'd never seen any of this before. Like my old hometown, the tallest building was 13-story Hilton Hotel, which I'd been up in once, but not, not until a year after that experience. So I'd never seen anything taller than 2 stories in my life. And all of a sudden I was up above my whole town. I could see the entire downtown area. I could see where my house was. I could see the ski area where I learned to ski and going. And then all of a sudden everything went black again, but only briefly. And the next thing I knew, I was laying on what looked like a table or bed in what felt like a room. And what I found out later was that everything on the other side is malleable. It responds to mental commands. Everything is energy based. We are energy based. The whole realm is energy based. And so by using our mental energy, if you want to call it that, we can manipulate the energies around us to create whatever we want or need in that particular moment. So we can create an entire miniature universe if we want to. Some beings do. But what these beings do is create a space that is strictly for that being who's being transitioned. And what it is to give you time and space to understand that you're dead and to acclimate to the other side so that you understand what happened, where you are, why, and everything else. So I was there for a while the first time because it took me, at 7 years old, I didn't have a lot of understanding. I'd never experienced death, not myself, and certainly not anybody else in my family. Like the first person I remember dying, I was 12. My 14-year-old best friend was hit by a drunk driver. That's the first death I ever experienced in my life. And so I had no idea what death what it entailed. But at this point I could see my guide, and also there were two other beings with him. There's always three. Every time you are brought to the other side, you're met by three beings. And two of them, what they are is they're in training. Basically, the main guide is their trainer in that respect, where they're learning how to help others transition. So the whole time I was there, they never spoke to me. I never spoke to them. I always dealt directly with my main guide. And he explained to me that I would have to go through an experience. He said every being goes through this when they transition over to the side of the side of life. And he said it's called a life review. And I've since found out that most everybody has one of these. And what it is, they brought me to, like, that area basically fell away. And I found myself in this, what looked like a long hallway with doors on both sides. And each door led to a kind of recessed room where you had to take a couple, it was like a ramp that led down into this recessed space. And there was this horizontal pod that was about as long as a bed, maybe the size of a single bed. And it was just meant to hold the being inside of it. And then it uses telepathic connections to link to your particular being, because every being has its own energy signature. That's how we recognize each other on the other side, because we're not this body. This is just the one I've used in this lifetime, but I've had others before this. I'll have others after this. So that's not who we are. We're this energy-based being, and it has no particular shape. I call it an amorphous blob of light, because that's what it looks like. It was like this bluish purple light, kind of like if you see the earth behind my head here, that particular part of earth, the kind of that bluish, dark bluish color. It was like that all over. And then at the center was this beautiful, perfect bluish green white light, like white surrounded by this bright blue green, that was at the very center of this being. And so that's what I saw every time I saw any being that I came across on the other side. Everyone looks the same. So the energy signature that each one of us has is unique, like a fingerprint. And that's how we recognize each other, and also how these life review pods recognize us. And they link everything's telepathic. Communication's telepathic. The life review pods are telepathic. And so they connect to your particular energy signature, find out what being you are, and then they can show you either the current lifetime that you are in or have just finished, or they can show you any previous lifetime that you have lived. So, like, I know I've told you this in conversation, but for your listeners, in my second near-death experience, I actually had a separate life review where I saw the last 3 lifetimes before this one, because I needed to understand something I was experiencing in this life. And the reason for it was from a previous lifetime. So, like I said, with this life review pod, you can see any lifetime that you've ever lived as that being, because all of them are connected to it. It's like, how to put it, like if you have a folder on your computer, you open it up and there's like all these files inside of it. It's like that. Like that folder is you, and all the files inside of it are all the lifetimes that you've lived, everything that you've ever experienced, everything that you've ever said or done, who you did to, the things that you've accomplished, the evolution that you've experienced as a being. Everything having to do with you is in this file, if you want to call it that. I was able to see everything that I ever said or did, who I said it to, and I saw it and felt it from their perspectives, which is the one unique thing about life reviews. And a lot of people think that, like, when you do bad things, you're punished in the afterlife. That's not the case. No one's ever punished, because the choices we make have to be first created for us to choose them. We can't just make it up. So, but what they think of as punishment is this life review where you are able to experience, like, if you've done things bad in your previous life, you experience those bad things from the perspective of the people you did them to. You hear it as they heard it, not as you said it, not as you felt it, but as they did. And so you get to experience both sides and both perspectives. And what that is to teach us that what we do in every moment of every lifetime it affects not just us, but everyone around us. And so, like, we come to this realm to experience separation, individuality, things that we can't experience on the other side, because on the other side, we are fully connected. And that's all we ever experience is that connection. We don't hold another being back, because to hold them back would be to retard our own experiences. So we understand that intimately on the other side. But on this side, we don't. We forget that when we incarnate into a body. And so what we experience is a separate individuality lifetime. And that's how, so when we act out of that separation, out of that individuality. We think that, well, if this is me, well, these people over here, they might be worse than me. These people might be better than me. It's always about rating how we compare to everyone else. And we act in a way where it's about competition. It's about like what do I need to do to be better than that person? Like, that's why so many of us will not only try to better ourselves, but we better ourselves by putting others down. We feel like we have to hold them down to push ourselves up. Like both of you are drowning and you have to push them down to hold yourself above the water. And what we don't realize is that that's not at all how things really are. But we just think it is because we see ourselves as individual, separate beings, but we're really not. So that was the biggest revelation for me, was understanding that we are all connected, not only to each other, but to everything else in the universe, that there is nothing that's not connected to us and that we're not connected to. And of course, at 7 years old, I hadn't really done much, but I had done one thing. I had a cousin who was 6 months older than me on my father's side, and he had this particular Matchbox car. It was a 60s model Ford Mustang. I don't remember what year, but it was a Ford Mustang. And it was exactly like the one, it was even the same color as the one his father owned. And so his father got him that as a way, kind of like, your version of my car. And he cherished this car so much, loved this car. He never went anywhere without it. And I remember seeing it at his house one time, and I didn't know his connection to this car. I just knew that he had it. And I thought it was a cool car. I wanted it. So I took it. And I brought it home with me. And what I saw in this life review at that particular moment was I saw him panicking and, "Mommy, where's my car? I can't find my car. Help me find my car." And crying and not being able to, and crying for like nights on end and not being able to sleep, feeling just, so sad. And I could feel everything that he felt so intimately that, like I cried just watching him cry. And it was like I was crying. It wasn't him doing it. It was me. And in fact, that moment stuck with me when I came back. So much so that when I got better and went home, the very first thing I wanted to do was find that car and bring it back and give it to him. And I did. And he never blamed me for taking it. He never, got angry about it. He was just so happy to have it back. And, I expected to be, I think I was scolded by my parents, but his parents never said a bad word to me. He never did. He was just so happy to have his car back. He actually hugged me. And I didn't think I deserved to be hugged because I'd stolen his car. Like, this is your car and I took it from you. I was expecting to get hit, if anything, not to be hugged. So that stuck with me probably more than anything after I came back. It was just the knowledge of how connected we are to each other and that what we do affects others that deeply. So that one, like I said, I hadn't done really a whole lot at that point. I was only 7 years old. Not 7-year-olds don't really do much by that point. So my life review was very short. And afterwards, I asked my guide, I said, what do we do now? Where do we go? He said, "You're free to explore if you wish. You can look around, do whatever you want." And I didn't really know what to do or where to go, but something inside of me did. And in fact, when I closed my eyes and opened them again, I found myself in this field in the mountains. And it was like a really, really steep mountain to my right. And there was a field full of like flowers of every color all around me, like red, blue, yellow, white, you name it, was there. And then there was like steep, the mountain kept going below me to my left. There was a deep mountainous valley below me. And then on the other side across from me was another set of mountains. And both lines of mountains were going into the distance. Like if I'm sitting, I'm facing west, like towards where those two mountain ranges were going. And in the distance, I could see this one mountain that looked different than any mountain I'd ever seen. It came up like a pyramid with the top chopped off of it, but then the tip was slanted. So like it came up to a point, and then the tip, instead of being straight, it was slanted like this. So it was very different, and it stuck with me when I came back as the one image I remembered. And I didn't know where I was, but this place felt like home to me. And like I felt so at peace in this field. And the flowers, what I found out very quickly was colors on the other side have their own energy signature and their own resonance. So each color creates a sound. And so when you have multiple different colors, it sounds like a space chorus. I don't know how else to describe it. It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. It just flowed, and the music was all around me, flowing through me. I felt like it was part of me. I've never heard a sound on this side that like I've heard some binaural beats music and relaxation music that sounds like parts of it, but nothing that sounds exactly like it. And I felt like I could just stay in this field forever and never want to leave it. I remember as I was laying there watching the sun, like, normally just goes at a slow pace, but it went at a much faster pace. Like like almost like time was flowing at 10 times normal speed or something. And so I could see the sun dipping below the horizon just to the left of that mountain I was describing. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the stars came out. But unlike here, where they look like just points of light, all, like they look like they're all the same distance away from us. They're just different sizes, different colors. And on the other side, all the stars looked like they were three-dimensional. They looked like you could reach out and touch them. And it was something I mean, I've had a hard time describing it. It was like every star had depth to it. And each one looked like it was a different distance away from me. Like some of them were so close I could grab them. Other ones were further away. And it created this three-dimensional scene in the sky that unlike anything I've ever seen. I was up in space over the earth, and I could see, like I was right over the Terminator, which, between and I could see, different parts of the world just kind of slowly going by as I was watching, going from night into day and day into night. And it was the most amazing thing I'd never seen in any kind of astronomy photo at that point in my life. I hadn't even seen the pictures of Europe or anything outside of my hometown. I was in a gifted class, but they focused on science and math. They didn't really focus on history or geography or other places. So I had no experience of anything outside of my hometown at that point in my life. I'm up in space, seeing something I've never seen before. And the earth looked like this giant, glowing blue, green, and brown ball of light that was, like I've heard astronauts describe it, where it's like you don't see any lines. There's no countries. There's no religions. There's no separation. It's all one world, and we all share it. And the feeling that it gave me, I've been obsessed with astronomy and space photos and everything like that ever since, because just being up in space, it feels like home to me. I feel at peace, and like I'm home up there. I got to explore a bit of like most of the solar system. I saw all the different planets, most of their moons. Got to do up close and personal with the sun, which was really cool, because it was like this orange and yellow and red with these giant like brownish black spots. And I didn't know what sunspots were at that time. So, I just saw these, but I didn't see it like we see it. It wasn't like so bright I couldn't look at it. There was no light on the other side that was so bright I couldn't look at it. I could look at it just like I'm looking at the screen on my phone right now. And so we look at it with different eyes. It's not human eyes. We're not limited like we are here. We're completely unlimited on the other side. So one thing that stuck with me is instantaneous communication, instantaneous creation, instantaneous. If you think about it, it happens. Like if I'm trying to communicate with another being, I just think what I want to communicate, and they can automatically pick up on it. So there's no need to I can't vocalize it, because there you don't have a body no mouth, no vocal cords, no tongue, nothing to create sound with. So we don't speak like we do here, which is a very limited form of communication. Well, telepathy is actually a very pure form of communication because you don't lie to each other. You don't hide things from each other. Everybody knows the truth about everyone else. And you just, you automatically know, you know everything automatically. You don't have to ask about it. You just know. And traveling, all you have to do is look at, where you are and then focus on where you want to be and you're there. And you just teleport like something out of Star Trek, but except there's no limits to it. I could focus on, like, in my mind's eye, I could see the various planets, like almost in a diorama in front of me. And I could, just focus on one. And it was just like going from seeing a diorama to being in the diorama that quickly. I could create something that was in that field, and I had this urge to create this log cabin that I saw in my mind, and it literally was just there suddenly, like what I saw in my mind was there in front of me. It was the most amazing thing. Like I was like, oh, cool, it's being 7 years old and you can create anything that you can think of. That's like heaven, literally. But I was kind of limited in that one. But when I came back, I was still in a coma. I would be in a coma for 7 more days after I returned. But it took me a month to speak again, to function, to acclimate to the passage of time, because time doesn't pass there like it does here. And we think of, okay, you've got to go through this point to get to where I am now. And then I have to go through this point, and that point to get to that point down in the future. So that's why we think of the passage of time and how we think about space. Like if we want to get somewhere, we have to walk or, drive a car or fly a plane or whatever to get from point A to point B. We don't just instantaneously move there. But on the other side, it's like if you take that string and you crumple it up into a big ball where all the points in that string touch all the other points in that string simultaneously. So every point in space and time is completely accessible from any other. All you have to do is know where you are and where you want to be, and you're there. Just instantaneous moving from one to the other. Between being in that field in the mountains and then being up in space, exploring the solar system, it felt like a year's worth of time. And so when I came back and found out I'd only been gone for 6.5 minutes here, it didn't make any sense. And my mind almost shut down from being overwhelmed, from not I didn't understand. I couldn't put the pieces together and make them make sense. And this is like the late 1970s, 1978. So back then there was no computer, there was no Google, no social media. There was nothing, no way for me to look something up except to get a Encyclopedia Britannica that every family had, or use my library card and go find a book. But I didn't know what to look for. How do you look up near-death experiences if you don't know what they're called? So I felt like I was completely lost, and everyone had their own opinion of what I'd gone through. Most of them thought I was making it up or imagining it. Even my own family. The only person who ever believed me completely was my grandmother, and I found out much later, like more recently, why that is.
I have a question. What do you think that black nothingness is that you were in?
Just for me, it was just a limbo state. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I didn't feel anything. It was just like almost like in a way where, because like you think of existence like, okay, I exist right now. I can feel the clothes on me. So that's how you think of normal existence. But I didn't feel, see, or hear anything. And it felt like almost an eternity. So I know I've heard other people describe this nothingness, and they thought that was the end of their life. But I think it's more of a limbo state that, we're in the process of transition, but we're not fully alive or awake. We're not fully dead. It actually reminds me, there's a movie called Dragonfly. It came out in 2002 with Kevin Costner, Kathy Bates, and several other actors. Really good movie, and it involves near-death experiences, actually. There is a character in there played by Linda Hunt, who's a nun who studies near-death experiences. And at one point, she's talking to Kevin Costner's character, who's trying to understand why he's experiencing these weird things that keep happening to him. And she said that there's maybe 100 levels on the ladder of consciousness between being fully alert and being dead. And depending on what you're experiencing, like maybe during a surgery, they might bring you down only to the 10th rung. But then between that and being dead, there's, 100 layers of gray nothingness that, that nobody really understands, nobody has explored, and we don't know what's in that space between. Like, we understand anesthesia, we understand putting someone under for a surgery, but we don't know what death involves. We don't know, like, the black nothingness that I experienced, what that might be. I can only speculate based on my experience, but I don't honestly know what that was.
Did you feel like you could touch it? Like, did you feel that you could?
No.
I'm no, okay.
Like if you can imagine the darkest night you've ever seen, no light whatsoever, no sound. Have you ever like just laid in the water like at night, and the water's up and you just all you hear is your breath, your heartbeat.
Yes.
But you can't feel anything outside of you. It was like that multiplied by
Okay.
1,000.
Okay.
So all I felt was like I could sense my breathing, I could feel me, but outside of me, it was just black nothingness. There was
Were you
nothing
afraid
that
at that?
created. No, it felt
No.
peaceful. It felt
Okay.
I felt at peace. Like I didn't necessarily want to stay there. I mean, I didn't want to be in limbo forever, but it didn't feel dangerous. I didn't feel like I was going to be harmed by it. It just felt peaceful. Like, I'm just here. I'm just existing right now. It was just an internal moment of now is the way I describe it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Like the only way I can describe it is like an eternal moment of now where all you know is right this second, right this moment, where I'm here, I'm breathing, I can hear my heartbeat, I exist, but I don't know what else is going on. Like, the whole universe outside of me does not exist right now.
And did you have a thought did you think about anything or how you got there in that moment, or were you just relishing in the black void?
I didn't really think about. I didn't have conscious thoughts in that way. It was more instinctual.
Okay.
I did think about while I was actually on the other side. That's actually what brought me back. I was about as far away in the solar system as you can be from Earth and still be in it. And I could feel my grandmother thinking thoughts like, "I hope he doesn't die. I hope he survives." And her thoughts and her love drew me back. Like, I could feel it, and instantly I was right by her side in the hallway, looking through the same window at my body on the bed being worked on. And so that's what drew me back to Earth and then eventually to my body, because as soon as I was next to her and back in that room, I heard the same voice of my guide in my head. "It's time for you to go back." And I said, do I have to go back? I don't want to go. I love where I was. I want to stay here. Can I stay? And he said, "No, you can't. I'm sorry, because you have things you still need to do. You have people you need to help. And unfortunately, this is part of choosing to live. You choose the life that comes with it. It's not just existing. We choose the actions, what we experience, who we meet along the way, the obstacles that we have to overcome. All of that is chosen by us before we incarnate. So in order to stay on the other side, I would have to give all that up. I would have to basically nullify everything that I chose." And he said, "You have things that you need to do. Every one of us has a purpose in every life." And he said, there are things that are going to happen that are important that you play a part in. Everyone plays its own part in. And so in order for things to happen the way they're meant to, some people must return so that others, can go on. Like, not everyone's meant to come back. That's why it doesn't come back. A lot of people still die.
Why do you think that some people
Experience
choose?
what I did and other people don't.
Yeah, kind of. But do you feel that everybody gets a choice when they cross over and they come to that point? And do you think that some just choose to go on to the other side, or do you think that they
No,
actually no? Do you think that
no,
they are
no.
told to come back?
Yes. In fact, a lot of them are actually made to come back, because each one of us has a path in each lifetime. We have an overall life path that, we're all like, if you think of each lifetime like the moments in this lifetime. So this lifetime is like the overall lifetime. Each moment in it is like each individual lifetime in that life, if that makes sense, like an analogy. So in order for us to accomplish what we set out to do in each particular lifetime, because each lifetime contributes to the being that we will become. It gives us the experiences that's why we come here, is to go through the experiences that we have. Each one of them teaches us different things or provides different ways of evolving and advancing our being as we move along through life. And so to skip out of that is to set yourself back in a way, there's a overall progress that you're supposed to make as a being. And if you deny yourself individual lifetimes just because you don't want to stay on earth or stay wherever you happen to be, then what you're doing is you're slowing down your progress as a being. When we incarnate into each lifetime, all of us, every being, chooses the path that they want to follow, what they want to accomplish in this life, the obstacles and challenges that they want to overcome, because evolution is always done in response to adversity. If you ask any evolutionary biologist,
Do you think that those are pre-planned?
Yes, everything
You think that we pre-plan those before we come and incarnate here?
Yes, all of us do.
Okay.
There are some who believe that we don't, but I saw it firsthand, and I've seen it in my own life, this life and others, because I've seen 4 lifetimes now between the different life reviews that I had. And so we choose what we do. Everything's a choice, and we all have free will, both on this side and the other side. We always have free will, and no being, not even the one some people call God or the creator or source. I choose to call it source because it's like the source of all love, source of all of us, source of everything in the universe. So I call it source. But whatever you call that being, even that being will not interfere in your free will. It chooses not to, because if it interfered with your free will, then your will would not be free. You see what I mean? In order for it to be free will, it has to be free of interference from any being in the universe other than the one making the choice. So all of us have that. And that's why in certain lifetimes, we are able to do things that we didn't mean to do. I chose, in my second life, 2 lifetimes ago, I wanted to be a different person than I ended up being. I made bad choices in my life, and those led to harmful consequences for me and for other people. And in fact, this lifetime, I am atoning for that lifetime, for the choices I made in that lifetime. So,
And did you end up finding that all out in your second NDE? Or did
I
you
did.
grasp some in the second, not from the first?
No, the first one was more of this is a new experience for me. And, I'm just getting used to how things work. So each one of us chooses everything that we're going to experience. And then what we do with that when we actually, the challenges and obstacles that we choose when we actually encounter them, what we decide to do in that moment determines where we go from there. It's like a choose your own adventure. If you pick this choice, you go to that page. If you choose this other choice, you go to a different page, and you have a different adventure by choosing each one. So
How long did it take you to heal from your first NDE?
I was in the hospital I was in a coma for a week after I came back. I was in the hospital for a full month total. So I'd been in the hospital for less than a week before I died. So I was in the hospital for another almost 3 weeks after I came back. I was so very sick, and it took me a while to get this virus out of my system. The ironic part of it was I was not the only one who died during the coma. There was 5 of us who did, but of those 5, I'm the only one who came back. The other 4 died and stayed dead. So that's how serious this virus was.
So why don't you take us into the second NDE? I'm so excited to hear about the life review. I'm curious about everything else too, but I'm really
Yeah.
interested in listening
Well,
to what
real
happened
quick
in this one.
before we go into that, I want to tell you the field that I was in the mountains. I'll tell you how I found out what that was real quick before I delve into it.
Sure.
When I came back, I was telling my grandmother about what I experienced, and she's like I said, she's the only one who ever believed me right off the bat, and I'll tell you why later. But I was describing this field that I was in and the mountain that I saw, and it sounded familiar to her, and so she said, "Can you draw it?" And I started to draw this, scribble here, scribble there. And I said, a tip that slants off to the side like this. And she said, "That looks so familiar." And she went and got her encyclopedia from the other room. And she started flipping through pages. And she knew it was something she'd seen in Europe, but she couldn't think of it, the name right off the bat. And suddenly she came back with this encyclopedia and put in front of me and showed me this picture. And I said, "That's it. That's my mountain." And this is according to her, what she told me. And turns out it was the Matterhorn in Switzerland. and in the field in Switzerland. And the cabin I told you about that I created out of my mind was a cabin I lived in that lifetime 3 lifetimes ago. The first lifetime that I remember from my second life review was that lifetime in Switzerland, which I consider like my perfect life. My best life was in Switzerland. That's why I feel completely at home there and why I returned there after both life reviews in both NDEs. So that's how I found out where it was.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah.
Now you're taking us into NDE
Into
number
the second
2.
one.
This is excellent.
Number 2.
Wow.
So it was 7 years later. So I was 14 years old. I was at a camp about 2 hours away from home. What I didn't know is one of my main bullies was also there. When he found out that I was at this camp, he immediately started coming after me. And so what he ended up doing, he came right at me, basically shoved me backwards over the bed. And the way this thing was set up, the camp was actually an old farm that this family had donated to the group that was hosting the camp. So where we were sleeping at was an old 3-story barn. The first level was all their like offices, the logistical space. The second floor was where the staff slept and ate and all that. And so the third floor used to be the loft where the hay was and things like that. The way it was set up, the barn had like an A-frame roof. So the roof was supported by these 4x4-inch wood beams. And so the way this set up is like straight, a square beam where the one corner sticks out towards, it holds the roof up, and the other corner sticks out into the room, if you can imagine. And this used to be a loft in a barn, so it didn't matter that it stuck out like that. But what happened was when this kid pushed me back over the bed, I stumbled backwards directly into one of these beams, and it was at the height. Well, it impacted the back of my skull right on my brainstem. And the brainstem controls your lungs, your heart, basically all your basic bodily functions. So as soon as I impacted that beam with my head, full force, my body shut off instantly. And I was dead before I hit the floor. And the kid panicked immediately, ran away. They ended up finding him later. Luckily, one of the kids around me kept screaming for help, and a bunch of the counselors ran upstairs. One of them, thankfully, had been fully trained in CPR. And so he started doing the chest compressions and the breathing, and someone else called for an ambulance. But unfortunately, where the hospital was, it was about 3 or 4 minutes away. So it took them, a couple minutes to get to me. And then, of course, they had to put me on a gurney and literally hand carry me down 2 flights of stairs to get to the bottom floor where the ambulance was from the loft where we were. So the whole time he was doing the CPR, and then he was joined by one of the paramedics, because there was 3 of them. There's one driving and 2 in the back. And when they finally loaded him in the ambulance, the 2 paramedics took over the CPR from the counselor. And they got a heart rhythm and breath and everything else when we were less than a minute away from the hospital. But at that point, I'd already been dead for almost 4 minutes by the time they got there. And then, of course, carrying me down 2 flights of stairs, letting me in the ambulance, driving to the hospital. So I was dead for a total of 7.5 minutes, clinically dead. No heart rate, no breathing, no brain rate, nothing. When I came, I was still right on the verge of death when I arrived at the hospital. They actually had to work on me for more than an hour before they were able to restore somewhat of a like a normal rhythm. But like I said, before, when I realized I was dead, I knew I was dead right away. There was no blackness, no limbo state this time around. I was there. I was in the body, then I was out of the body, and I was in the back corner of the ambulance, watching the paramedics work on me the whole way to the hospital. We got like halfway to the hospital is where time seemed to stop for me. It was like it's almost like a movie where it like slows and then just stops. So it was like everything just stopped, like someone had hit the pause button. And that's when I heard the same sing-songy voice from my guide in my head. And he said, "You need to come with me." And I immediately went with him, went out of the ambulance, closed my eyes, opened my eyes. I was already on the other side, just like the first time. There was no tunnel, no transition. There was just, I'm here, then I'm there. And like I said, I already knew a lot of what I was going to experience. I knew I was having a near-death experience. I knew what they were at this point. I knew what I was going to see and experience. I knew about the life review. So I went right. The acclimation took less than, I was okay, I'm here. Let's go. Like let's get this done. I already know where I'm going. So they led me straight to the life review, and I'd done a few more bad things at that point, but nothing serious, nothing really bad that required, that would have really affected me that much. And I was a normal kid, normal stuff that kids do stupid stuff, but most of them don't really harm people deliberately. They don't cause a whole lot of trouble. They don't kill anybody, it's nothing like that. So once the life review was done, I immediately found myself back in that same field again. And, at this point, I mean, I knew where I was. I didn't know why, but I knew I felt at home in this place and I loved it. I still love Switzerland to this day. I've always loved the Alps area, like Italy, Switzerland, Austria. It's one of my favorite places in the world. I've only seen it in my near-death experiences or through pictures and books or online. But, I've never actually been there. But for me, it's always felt more like home than where I've lived here. And at this point, I knew I could go into space. So I immediately went, I left that field and I stared up and, into the space and I could immediately transition from day into night. I saw the stars the same way I'd seen them the first time and was up among them. But this time I wasn't like where this picture is. I wasn't outside of Earth. I was way out in space. I don't even know where I first like where I first appeared at. But at that point, I had seen a lot of photos of nebulas and galaxies and other stars. I was obsessed with space. I'd watched the Cosmos series on PBS with Carl Sagan, who was my hero, still is. Actually, in my middle school years, in my seventh grade year, which was the year before this, my science class actually took a field trip to Cornell University in upstate New York, where he was a professor, and I actually got to meet him. So it's like you can imagine like somebody who's like obsessed with a rock star or an actor getting to meet their hero. And I mean, you could have taken me right then. I would have been good to go. Okay, like I've done everything I want to do. I'm good. Let's go. So anyway, I'd seen Cosmos, and I always felt at home in space, as weird as that might sound. I felt like I belonged out there. I've always loved exploring, going places that no one else goes, seeing things that other people aren't seeing, like being the only one to see a certain scene or, clouds in a certain color, certain shape. Because reason I love taking pictures of clouds now is that they are always in motion. They're always changing. They're never the same from one moment to the next. So if what I'm seeing in that particular moment, no one will ever see again. And to know that I'm seeing something no one else can see is appealing to me in a very real, very deep sense. And so I wanted to explore and go. I went all over our galaxy, parts of Andromeda, which is over 2 million light years away. So, just going instantly appearing from one galaxy to the other. If you can imagine crossing over 2 million light years in less time than it takes you to blink, that should tell you how fast traveling really is. But I saw dozens of planets that were where it was very obvious and there's no way to deny it that they're either in very advanced culture was there now or had been very recently. You could see evidence of cities, lights. There were, you know, mechanical things in orbit. One of them had a giant ring around the planet and towers going up to it all the way around the equator of that planet. Like we've talked about building, like a ring around, some scientists have talked about building a ring around the Earth and having space elevators go up to it. It was something like that. And while I was exploring, I actually ran into two different species that I actually interacted with directly. The first one was this giant ship. And when I say giant, as big as our moon might be, it's nowhere near the biggest moon in the solar system. Actually, the biggest one is Ganymede, a moon of Jupiter. Callisto is another one that's up there. Titan, the moon of Saturn. Those are three of the biggest moons in the solar system. This ship was bigger than any of them. I mean, thousands of miles long, thousands of miles wide. It was a conglomeration of multiple ships that I found out later this species had basically joined all their ships together. The planet they came from was much higher gravity than ours. It wasn't much bigger than ours, but because of the very large and massive core in their planet, the gravity was 10 times what ours is. It was more like trying to grow up on Jupiter. It was so their species was very short statured, like 3.5, 4 feet tall, and none of them were taller than that. They were all very short. They had fur, a very thick fur all over. It was like a reddish brown color, like an orangutan color. But they were very muscular because of growing up in high gravity. They needed very strong musculature to get around. So they developed very strong muscles throughout their body. If you were to look at them right off the bat and just as a first glance judgment call, you would think this looks like a species that would be violent or would be warlike. But in reality, they were the kindest, most wonderful beings I'd ever met, period, bar none. They were very advanced. They had a direct connection to the other side where they were, they knew that's how they were able to see me and interact with me because unlike us, where we have to have near-death experience to experience the other side, they can experience it just like we experience normal life here. And so they were able to telepathically show me what had happened to their species, where they came from, what happened to their original planet, what led to where they are now. And after that species, I ran into another one. And this one, I didn't realize at first that I was being led, but it was actually my guide that was telepathically leading me to where his species was, the species that he belonged to most recently before he went to the other side, became my guide and stayed there. His species had also had to leave their original planet for a different reason. Their star went supernova. So they had, probably millions of years to realize this was coming. Like even at our limited level of advancement, we know the basic, what's going to happen to our sun already. Now they were able to get everyone off planet. In fact, they actually did multiple, they built more ships and they were able to leave in groups. And they, like the first species they ran into, they also had a direct connection to the other side to the point that they were actually led to a specific solar system that was, I think, like 100 light years away from where they had originated. And as I was hearing this story, I was following in like the path that they took to get to where they were, like almost like I was part of their species. And where I ended up was this solar system, and what I saw blew my mind and still to this day does. There's a hypothetical construct that I don't remember the guy's first name, but his last name was Dyson. He was a scientist who came up with an idea for a theoretical construct called the Dyson sphere. It was named after him. And what this thing would be is a construct, either a collection of satellites or a solid structure that would be built around a dying star. And what it would do is collect all the energy from that star where there's no waste and where it could be used to support an entire civilization for longer than they would be able to do normally if they weren't able to harness that energy. And this Dyson sphere, like normally they're only, the idea is to put them just around the star itself. This one was much bigger. Like if you can imagine, like there's a measurement called an AU, an astronomical unit, and that's the distance between the sun and the earth, 93 million miles. This thing was larger than the orbit of Jupiter, over 1 billion miles across, and on both sides, it encompassed the star and all 4 of the inner planets of the solar system that it was in. And it had been built by a species more than 3 or 4 billion years before them that had abandoned the sphere for unknown reasons. They only knew about how old it was by dating the materials that were left behind, but they didn't know who built it. They didn't know why. They didn't know what became of them, whether they died out, moved on somewhere else, or what. But this sphere was still activated, still working. It was built to last, basically, billions of years, and had collected so much energy that they could power their civilization for 1,000 years and not have to use anything extra. So they were led in the first planet closest to the star was too close, where it's like Mercury in our solar system. There's no way you could live there. But the next 3 planets were all habitable, but had different environments. The first one was like the Southwest United States, a lot of desert, rocks, but everything, like the whole civilization that lived there had used the rocks, and they had to build their civilization like they used the Native Americans who lived then. And so the species had built, using the environment to build. It was not in spite of the environment. It was in conjunction with the environment, if that makes sense. So most of their species settled there. And then the 4th planet out was dominated by these giant trees. And when I say giant, they make redwoods and sequoias look like twigs. The smallest of them is over 1,000 feet tall. Most of them are 4 to 5,000 feet, and they're all interconnected. Like, have you seen the movie Avatar? It came out in 2009 or something like that. Okay,
Oh,
it's a James
yes.
Cameron movie. So if you can imagine the home tree that species lived in, where it was like this giant, except imagine it made out of multiple trees that are all twisted together in a spiral that continues up like 10,000 feet. It was like Earth in that way, where it's not all water was not in one place, like the third planet. It was like, there was lakes and ponds and, a couple of oceans here and there. But it appealed to the being that was as my guide. His parent was very much appealed to him, and he decided to settle there. And my guide was actually born there on that planet. Yeah, when he originally found me or saw me, he watched my life three lifetimes ago, and the one in Switzerland, and he felt like there was something we shared, some trait that we shared, and it drew him to me, and he became my guide. And then later, I consider him like my brother. I call him my space brother because we're not related by blood per se, but we have a very strong connection. Like even now, there's times where he communicates things with me. I can't speak to him directly like I'm speaking to you. He knows what I'm thinking, and he's able to communicate things to me. So that's how I found out stuff about my grandmother, for instance, later on when I found myself back here or back where I started and with him. And that's when I realized he'd been showing me his species and his story. He wanted me, like, he knew my story and he wanted me to know his. And so for me, it was a really special moment. I still get choked up a little bit sometimes when I think about it because, like, it means a lot that he felt like he could share that with me. I've never had another being even here that same connection that I have with him. It's not a romantic connection, nothing like that. It's like the purest unconditional love that one being can have for another is what we share. Like there's nothing there, nothing like that. It's just we want the best for each other. We look out for each other. We communicate with each other. So we're connected in a way that I'm not connected to anyone else and can't be because, I'm a separate being here. And unfortunately, I still experience that, in my daily life, even though I know there's more to it. You wanted to know about my other life review, so let me get to that part. I'd already experienced 7 years of bullying. Bullied. In fact, the bullying started 3 months after my first near-death experience. There's something I didn't mention earlier. I was told, in my reason why it took most of a year, part of that was because I was shown and told exactly what was going to happen in this life. Why, like what I was here to do, the bullying that I would experience, the injuries I would suffer, the abuse that I would go through with my mother, abuse with my brother, the pain and suffering that I would experience most of my life, the fact that the brain injuries that I suffered would cause CTE. I knew all of that at the age of 7. So you want to talk about a burden to carry? That was a burden, but it helped because I didn't go through that thing where, like some people find out that they're going to die young. It's a sudden jolt and they don't know how to handle it. I had, I had 47 years to prepare for it. So I've known my whole life what was coming. But at the point of my second near death experience, I knew what was happening. I didn't know why. And so I asked my guide, why am I going through so much pain? Why am I going through so much suffering? And he said, we can show you if you really want to know, but it will not be a pleasant experience for you. He was warning me. I didn't really heed it because I had this driving need to know what was going on, and that overwhelmed my better sense, if you will. What it is, they brought me back to the life review chamber again. When the chamber read my energy again, this time it knew I wanted to see why, like what happened that would cause why I would be experiencing this pain and suffering. And so it showed me the last 3 lifetimes that I lived before this one. It showed me the basic perfect lifestyle, the perfect life that I experienced in Switzerland, where I was a natural healer. My wife was a natural healer. We had different skills, but they dovetailed off each other perfectly. So we met and married, and then we used our skills together to heal people in our community and the area around where we lived. And we had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, all of whom took after our same line of work. And actually, what they ended up doing was they formed the very first actual hospital in that region of Switzerland, which was in action for, I think, over 150 years before it was replaced by newer facilities. And so, they were showing me this because it was a lifetime where I had done everything that I had meant to do and nothing that I hadn't meant to do. And so I experienced the best consequences that a being could experience all the way through. That's why I felt so much at home in Switzerland, because I lived there and this was my perfect life. Then the next life changed everything. And this one, the first one it started around mid 90s and continued through most of the 1700s. I know it was in my 70s when I died, so I'm guessing around 1770, give or take a few years. The second one began in either 1795 or 1796 and continued into the 1800s. This one was my first lifetime in America versus Europe or somewhere else. I was born in mid-state New York, like around where Albany is. I don't know the name of the town. It's somewhere that has changed names, I think, since then. And what ended up happening, I had a very strong financial sense, like anything to do with money, stocks, bonds, banking. I knew, like, I could do it automatically without even thinking about it. I was considered a financial guru even at a younger age. And I kind of caught the attention of the head of a bank in New York City, who said he would take me under his wing and let me apprentice under him, because that's how banking was done back then. You didn't go to college to become a banker. You apprenticed yourself to someone already in the industry and learned from them. I became his apprentice, shot up the ranks very quickly. The stock market in New York was very new at that particular point in history. It had just started, I think, a couple decades before that by some traders, I think, in New York. There was like 22 or 24 traders who got together, decided to form the stock exchange, and, a lot of people to buy stock in companies that went public. I took to that immediately. I understood it right from the very beginning when I was shown it. What I found out is I was meant to use these skills to help people, to get them into homes that they could pass on to their future generations, to their family, to help them become financially secure in their retirement and other things like that. What I did instead was about the worst thing I could have done. I let my greed and my ego take over and determine what I chose to do, which was embezzle money from the company I was working for, as well as set up loans, both home loans and personal loans, that were beneficial to the bank, but would have changing interest rates that would eventually make their payments unsustainable to the people who had them. So people were jailed and put in debtors' prisons for defaulting on loans, or they were evicted from their homes when they couldn't make the mortgage payments anymore. At that point, debtors' prisons were still a thing. They were actually outlawed federally in 1833, but the states kind of outlawed them. Some outlawed before that, some outlawed after that. But it was around that time is when that was outlawed, and this is because of what they did to people, and that there was no way to recoup the losses. There was other better systems out there, and they already existed before debtors' prisons really were a thing, and so they decided to go a different direction. So they were outlawed because there was just something better they could do. I ended up harming hundreds of people. I don't even know how many families were involved, but of course, the women at that time, they couldn't work. They were always meant to stay at home, take care of the children, take care of the home. And a lot of these men were ending up in debtor's prison or going to real Sing Sing prison in New York. Had just been built not long before that, and was the main prison for New York City, and is actually still in existence today. So some of them were sent to Sing Sing for committing like theft type of crimes, trying to get food for their families or money that they could use to buy stuff for their families. And so a lot of the rest of the family, of the wife and children, were left to fend for themselves. If they didn't have family members who could help them, they were left to their own devices. And so a lot of these kids ended up on the streets begging for food, begging for money, anything that they could get. And in this life review, I could see each one of their faces, what I'd done to them, how it made them feel, what it caused in their life. I saw kids that literally froze to death on the streets in the winter in New York City. Other kids that died of starvation. People that, wives that took their own life. Or, there's a couple of them that killed themselves and their children to spare them, what was coming. And I had to see their faces one by one and realize what I'd done to them. And that experience broke me in ways I cannot even begin to describe. And like I've tried a couple times where I've actually broken down and cried even now, and I'm in my 50s. So that tells you how much of an impact this thing had on me. When I came out of that life, immediately my soul, my spirit, my karma, whatever you want to call it, wanted to make up for what I'd done. I made my first mistake after that life, where what I did is I decided to go right back to Earth in another lifetime, and I would just end it early. I would die young. And, my death would somehow make up for everything that I'd done to all these people, because I was stupid and naive and didn't realize what I was doing. So I came back. I was born in 1900 in either Indiana or Iowa. I know it was one of the Midwest I states, but I'm not sure which of those two it was. And at that particular point, not long after that, the World War I has happened in 1914, ended in 1918. But before it ended, the influenza and epidemic Spanish flu swept the world and killed millions of people. It was the worst pandemic that the world's ever experienced since the Black Plague in Europe in the Middle Ages. And I chose to die from that. So I died before I turned 18. I was born in late 1900, like October, November, something like that. And I died in the spring of 1918. So I was still 17 when I died. Came back to the other side, and I immediately knew something was wrong. Like nothing had changed. I didn't feel different. Didn't feel like I'd accomplished anything. And I was thinking, like, what else can I do? Like what, that's when I saw this area that some people, I think, have called hell when they have their near-death experiences, but is not as they think it is. It's not a place for permanent torture or punishment or anything of that sort. It is an area where beings who think that either they need to be punished for what they've done or don't feel like they deserve the light and unconditional love that is around all of us there on the other side. So they choose to segregate themselves from other beings in this area that's dark and dreary and miserable and full of bad karma and, I mean, just the worst things you can think of. And so it can maybe look and feel like hell to someone who's seeing it for the first time. But I almost joined them when I came back from that last lifetime. But I decided, thankfully, to go see my guide first. I told him what I'd done. He already knew, but I told him anyway. And I said, what do I do? I feel like I should join these beings, just suffer somehow. I must suffer for what I've done. And he said, if you do that, it's the most selfish, self-serving thing you can do. It won't, he said, you just spent an entire lifetime on earth that accomplished nothing. You didn't help anybody. You didn't do anything with that life. You just existed. Do you feel like that life was worthwhile? Did it accomplish anything? And I said, no, I don't. It didn't do anything for me. He said, because it might as well never have happened at all for all that it actually accomplished. And he said, if you do this, if you choose this other option, all you're doing is that on the other side, doing the exact same thing, just all over again in a different way. And I said, well, that doesn't work and this doesn't work. What am I supposed to do? How do I make up for this? I said, I can't go on feeling this way. And he said, there is one way that you can make up for this, but it's a way that is very hard for many beings to do. And he said, you have to live what's called a life of atonement. And I asked him to describe what that was. And what it is, you have to choose to come back to Earth or wherever you happen to be from at that particular time. And you have to experience pain and suffering at the level that you once inflicted on others. So whatever I caused to those people in that previous lifetime, I have to experience. And there wasn't enough for me to just experience it. Like most people, when they experience pain and suffering, the first thing they want to do is take it out on somebody else. Like misery loves company, that kind of expression, where I'm hurting, so I'm going to make somebody else hurt. And he said, you can't do that no matter what. You have to use that pain and suffering and you have to convert it into sympathy, empathy, and compassion for other beings. And he said it is the hardest road to walk, but if you can do it, not only will you atone for what you did in that life, not only will you balance yourself out, but you will accomplish more in one lifetime than most accomplish in 10. I said, I'll do whatever I have to do. And that's when I came into this life. And so that's why I've been experiencing bullying and abuse and injuries and pain. And it's been like that every day since I was 7. So 47 years and counting, I've been dealing with this.
Why do
Once
you
I
think you had this next NDE? What made you, why do you think you had this next one? Do you think that it was a reminder? Like, were you off path? Or,
That's
you know what I
exactly
mean?
why.
Okay.
Near-death experiences are not planned like our lifetime is. They for some beings, like if you I'll give an example, I'll use Hitler again. Someone like Hitler is so far gone in this life, there's no redemption for that. He's gonna have to live a lot of lifetimes of atonement to make up for what he did in that one lifetime. Beings like that, there's no redemption for them in this life. There's no point. But for other beings who may have wandered off their path, who maybe can accomplish something wonderful, it can help a lot of people, and maybe have just wandered off their path a little bit, they can be reminded this is what the path is that you chose. Here's where you are, here's where you should be. Get back over there. So that's what NDEs are for, is to remind us of the choices we made before we incarnated and to help us get back on our path. And that's why there's, I think on average, only 5 to 10% of the population has experienced near death experiences from the information that we currently have. And that's why not everybody needs that and not everybody would benefit from it. So it has to be a being who isn't so far gone that it just wouldn't help them. And they have to be, not only that, they have to be willing to follow a different path when they return, because I had to change everything about the way my life was being lived when I returned from that near death experience. Not only that, but I chose to come back with all of the information that I learned, all of what I saw and heard and experienced in both near death experiences when I came back, which most beings don't do. I chose to take that burden on because I needed that information to do what I wanted to do. Like, in order to accomplish the goal that I've set for myself, I needed more information than I had in this life. And so it's something it's plagued me at times throughout this life. It's not the easiest thing to do by any means, but it's worth it to me because, there's things I want to do, people I want to help. And in order to do that, I need information that I wouldn't otherwise have known. NDEs are basically, like I said, they're a reminder for those who've experienced them of what they chose to be in this life, where what they chose to use this life for, and so they can get back on the path that they were meant to be on, rather than the one they're going down at that particular time. And so I had 2 of them, so I needed extra reminding, as you can probably tell. I was, especially in the second one, I was definitely off the reservation. I was trying to be like my friends. I was doing stupid stuff and trying to impress people who weren't my friends and never had been. I was doing stuff that, had I continued down that road, would have become harmful. I was surrounded by a lot of bad consequences, harmful consequences. And if I had been subjected to that for very much longer, I might have chosen some of those for myself because I was, surrounded by it all the time.
What do you think helped you to stay away from that?
That near death experience, both of them, especially the second one. Like, the first one was an experience, but it didn't change much in that regard. It was more of a, okay, this is what the other side's like, and this is what's going to happen to you, and this is what you're supposed to do. But it wasn't as informational. The second one changed everything. When I came back from that, I was a completely different person than the one who came in. I didn't feel the same way. I didn't see things the same way. My perspective was wholly different. I could see the connections between people that I never seen before. I could see patterns and things that I never saw before. Things just started to make sense. I realized that what I'd been doing up to that point wasn't what I was supposed to do. And more than that, was going to end up becoming harmful to me and to other people. And I needed to fix that. I needed to change where I was going and what I was going to become. I didn't like the person that I was. I realized that even before I went in, but I didn't want to see that. Like, like some people just they know they're doing wrong, but they don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to see it. They just want they want no one to point it out. I was like that before I went into that second near death experience. I didn't want to, I was doing bad things and I didn't want to acknowledge that. I didn't want to change who I was. I just wanted to keep going and the way things have been.
How did you come back from your second one?
The second one, I was actually brought back because, well, first of all, I knew almost right away that I would have to return because I'd had to come back the first time. And I knew based on what I'd learned and what I'd been shown that there were things I needed to accomplish here that couldn't be accomplished on the other side. And so I knew right away I was going to have to come back. So it wasn't a fight. I mean, I didn't want to come back. There's always a part of us that wants to stay there. Even the most knowledgeable ND want to stay on the other side because it's so incredibly wonderful and it's beautiful. It's the most amazing thing you'll ever see or experience in your life if you ever have one. And but I knew that there were things that I needed to do and I wanted to do them. That's the thing. It's like it wasn't just that I knew I needed to. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I guess I got to do this. Let's go ahead and just finish it up and get it done. It was a real deep desire in me. I want to do this. I want to accomplish these things. I want to help people. And I was eager to go back in that regard. So as soon as that near-death experience, where the first one was about a year on the other side, this one was over a decade. Like you can imagine 10 years of your life here. Imagine experiencing that in 7.5 minutes. That's what a near-death experience is like. I came back, but in that 7.5 minutes on Earth, I experienced a decade on the other side because time doesn't pass like it does here. You can have a moment that lasts a lifetime, or you can experience an entire lifetime in a moment. And that second one is exactly what happened to me. I mean, I experienced a decade, where I spent 2 years learning about what's going to happen to humanity down the road. I spent 3 years learning how the universe works. I spent almost 5 years exploring our entire galaxy and parts of Andromeda. So, I experienced so much on the other side and I brought back all the memories, all the knowledge, everything that I learned and was shown from both experiences when I came back from that second one. I knew that, based on what I learned, based on what I saw, how much time that would take. And there is no way I couldn't have even acclimated to the other side in 7.5 minutes, let alone experience all the other stuff that I did. When I came back and I woke up in the hospital, they had brought me most of the way back, but I was still unconscious. So they use those little capsules. They break out like smelling salts that they stick under your nose, and it's really an acrid. It's like ammonium hydroxide, I think it is. And it's a very acrid smelling thing, and it basically shocks your system into alertness when you're unconscious. So it brought me kind of the rest of the way back, but I was still disoriented. And the doctor kept asking me questions, and it was like he was moving in slow motion, talking that's what he sounded like to me. And it felt like everything was moving in slow motion, like my brain had been sped up exponentially and everything else was slow now. I couldn't process what had happened to me, even though I knew what I'd seen and I knew it was real. And I came back with all that knowledge. I hadn't processed it yet. Like I just came back with this big suitcase full of stuff, but I hadn't delved into that suitcase yet.
Take you to process.
4 months it took me to function. I could not do my schoolwork. I couldn't deal with people. I couldn't even light hurt my eyes for a couple months after. Like bright light, I had to wear sunglasses everywhere I went because I couldn't, like even the dimmer lights in our house, I couldn't stand. They were like too bright for me because I'd seen so much that my whole physiology was changed. Not just my thoughts, not just my being, but because that being was changed, when I reattached to my body, that body became changed too, in a way, where I felt things differently. I experienced things differently. I felt things more deeply. I experienced emotions in such a strong way where they became a physical sensation rather than just an emotion I felt. But it took me 4 months to process even the basics, just to become a functioning, talking a child again. And I missed almost half of that school year because it happened during the summer. So I missed the last 2 months of summer and the first few months of my school year while I was reacclimating to being here. Then it took me another most of a month with a tutor to kind of get back up to speed with my class before I could return to school again. So that one really threw me for a loop, to put it mildly.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that story with us.
There's
For
so much
you.
of that. And like you and I are going to talk about this, I guarantee it. But the fact that there's just so much more involved,
Oh, yeah.
and that's just the skimming the surface part that we just
Yeah, we'll
talked
have to
about.
have you back for sure,
I'm
right?
always willing.
Since being back from both NDEs, have you brought back any different spiritual gifts with you? Or even after this first one, or even after the second one,
After the second one is when everything changed. But
they
I
get
came back.
stronger?
It was like my connection to people, my emotion, what I call like there's IQ intelligence, like book sense. There's also an emotional intelligence, like your ability to connect to other people, how you feel things around you versus just physically touching them. I can feel a table next to me versus like how I connect emotionally to other beings. And that sense became much stronger. I didn't put as much value on book education anymore, even though that was what my parents emphasized, what the school emphasized. There was much more to it, and I knew that. And so I started to deviate from the path that my parents wanted me to be on and to follow more of what I was meant to do. But the gift I came back with, like some people come back, they turn into mediums or channelers, or they have a telepathic sense, or they're able to see auras, things like that. Mine wasn't like that. Mine was dovetailed directly with the information that I brought back. And it was the ability to see patterns, the ability to see how pieces connect to each other. And because in order to make sense of everything that I brought back, which was a lot, I needed the ability to organize and sort that information in a way that I could grasp and then also turn around and use to explain things to other people, because that was my purpose in this life, was to help other people understand things that they don't understand, like what death means, where we go after we die, what we're meant to do, how connected we are in this world. There's things that people just don't know or don't experience because they think of themselves as separate individuals. I don't experience that anymore. I mean, to a degree, I'm obviously a separate person. I'm not you right now. I'm not somebody else right now. I'm me. But I experience my connection to other people far more than I ever did before. So that was my gift when I came back.
What would you say to someone that was afraid of dying?
That is my favorite question in the world. And it's the one I've gotten the most after my speeches I used to give, the, the conferences that I used to attend. What happens to us after we die? Why, you know, because people are taught to fear death. They're programmed to fear death by most of the time by their religious beliefs or their family or whoever. And I will tell them this: the other side, if you can imagine every place you've ever been that you love, everywhere that you've always wanted to go, every place that you've ever seen a photo of or a video, and say, man, I wish I could go there. Take all of that, crumple it into a big ball, and multiply it by infinity. You won't even be touching the surface of what it's like on the other side. It is that amazing. It's indescribable. It is overwhelming. What I saw of it in a total of 14 minutes being dead on this side, I experienced 11 years of time on the other side. And there's a reason why no NDEer wants to come back, why none of us are afraid of death when we come back. Even the ones who claim to have seen hell are not afraid of dying. That should tell you something. When everybody who's ever had this kind of experience says the same thing about death, that you shouldn't fear it, there's nothing to fear, that's something you should probably listen. People treat near-death experiences like they're going, like they want to get their car fixed. Instead of going to a car mechanic who knows how to fix a car, they're going to the drunk hobo on the street corner and asking him, hey, can you fix my car? Dad, I don't know nothing about cars. What am I supposed to do? Instead of asking the person who actually knows how to fix a car. If you want to know about death, ask people who've been there. Ask people who've experienced it. What's it like? Where did you go? What did you see? Did you want to come back? If where you made me come back, do you fear death now? And overwhelmingly, the answers are the same. Death is not something to be feared. It's a wonderful. You don't suffer. I mean, you might suffer on this side, but the actual point of transition. I'll give you an example. My mother used to work in a nursing home, and for years, and I also worked with terminal children at the Duke Children's Hospital for most of a year when not long after I got out of high school. So I've seen death up close and personal. I've seen people at their very end, in their final moments. I've actually helped several people transition to the other side, like been with them, hold their hand, talk to them while they're transitioning. If you ever see that, if you ever see a person actually die in their final moments, they smile, they are at peace. There's no more fear. There's no more pain. There's nothing but peace and love and happiness. And that is what all of them see. They see their relatives coming to greet them. They're happy. They have this smile that a mortician can't remove. And it's the most amazing thing. Like if I had to pick the most amazing experience on this side of the veil, it would be seeing someone go through that transition and knowing where they're going. That I've seen where they're going, and I know what they're experiencing, and I'm jealous. I'll say it right out in front. I am envious as hell of every single person who gets to transition to the other side while I'm still here, because I feel like I'm stuck here in some ways. Where as much as I want to help people and as much as I love feeling the connection to people, I miss being on the other side every single minute because it's with me every moment of the day. All I have to do is think about it and I'm back there like it was yesterday. So that's the hardest part for me, is waiting for my time to get here. And I don't know when my time is. I know it most likely will not be as far out as some people, farther than others. I mean, I've known people who died when they were kids and, didn't live a full life. But what I realized, it doesn't matter how many years you live. It's what you do with the ones you have. And that's, I think, the message I would want to leave people with.
I agree
Like,
with that.
it doesn't matter. You can do more in a 10-year life, lived with purpose, lived helping people and putting more love into the world than you can in 100 years of wasting. If you just exist and all you do is take from other people, you can live 100 years and you'll never feel the fulfillment and the satisfaction that a person who lives 10 years of giving. And that's the difference. It's not about how much money you can accumulate. You don't take any of that with you. You never do. So what's the point of it? It's just a means to an end. All money is a means to an end. It's a way to make things happen and to get food for your family and go places you want to go and do things you want to do. That's all money is. It's not a purpose unto itself. It's not meant to be a goal to seek. It's not meant to be something we chase after. And when we leave this world and we go to the other side, you don't take your money with you. You don't take your stuff with you. All you take with you is what you've done to help and love other people. That is what you remember most. And the stuff you regret is the times when you didn't do that. That's all you end up regretting when you leave this world, is all the times you could have helped someone and you didn't. The times you could have reached out to someone and you didn't. The times you could have put more love into the world and you didn't. That's what you regret. Not, I didn't spend, I didn't have a expensive enough car or big enough house or go on enough vacations or buy enough stuff. That is never at all part of the transition. You will never think about that ever again when you leave this world, ever.
That is really beautiful. And on that note, thank you so much for being here. And that was
Thank you for having me. I'm
absolutely
so glad to talk
stunning.
to you.
Thank you so much. It was really a great, great experience. I hope you
Thank you
take
very
care,
much.
and I have to have you back.
Well, I'm ready to go whenever you are. So just
We have
let
a
me
lot
know.
to discuss.
Yes,
Go on
what
for
we've done, what
hours.
we've done here is all we've kind of skimmed the surface of what I experienced, but there's so much below that. Like you see an iceberg, all you see is that little tiny bit on top of the water, but there's like 90% below. That's what part we haven't gotten to yet.
I absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.